And I thank the Chair, CEO and the staff for making themselves available on foot at the request by this committee to give us an update in relation not only to the briquette factories. I'm glad to see when you move to the last chapter of your presentation towards 2030, you mentioned other issues which are very pertinent to the development and to the ongoing viability of Móna. And as the Chairman rightly says, many of us here are very, we know only too well that the viability and the future viability of Móna is paramount to the economic activities of the Midlands region and has always been so. And there's been much change since they were initiated in relation to the power plants and other change in work practices and in development and so forth. And all of that, thankfully, was done by consensus and with the agreement of the workforce and the agreement of the communities therein. And that's why it's in place today, and that's why it has a chance of survival into the future. But I think, if I might break up in three sections the issues that you raise, and before doing so, I'm conscious of your own role, Chairperson, as Chair of Móna. You're appointed by government, and we're appointed by Minister Abbott, I think, at the time. And by association, then, the government is representative of the people. So you're conduit to the shareholders, and the shareholders are the public. And you act as that conduit in the best interests of the shareholder. And you said yourself when you were appointed, and you came before this committee back in September 2012, that the board will be collectively responsible for promoting the success of the company by leading and directing its activities. You said it will provide strategic guidance and monitor the activities and effectiveness of management. And I know you came well qualified for the role. You had an MA in Industrial Relations from Warwickshire University. You're a member of the Labour Court for close on 12 years as Vice Chair and Chair for 5 years. Isn't that right, 79 to 84? So there was great anticipation of your effectiveness as Chair and as that conduit. And with the knowledge and expertise you had, especially in industrial relations, one would have expected that any change or any diversification or any alteration in work practices or any cost-cutting exercise that might ensue would be well managed, closely monitored by yourself and the board in dealing with management to ensure that there was a smoothness and that morale was maintained amongst the workforce and the capacity to withstand any of those changes, of those amendments, would be well met and would be well intentioned, and as I said to you, would meet with the approval insofar as that is possible of the workforce. So in the first instance, the three issues I want to raise to deal with the issue that you dealt with primarily, and that is the briquette factories. And that's not to demean or diminish many of the other activities that take place right across Móna. The briquettes meet the fuel market, it's a supply of peat towards the horticultural sector, towards the power plants, the servicing of and maintenance of machinery and equipment and the workshops that we had and the apprenticeship models that was there prior to that, and then the seasonal work that supplemented many income of farmers and others in the region. That diversification that you've mentioned across all those areas over many years, and particularly I'm conscious of the 80s and the 90s when the power plants that you mentioned had come and their natural life had ended. And there was a huge effort and commitment on the part of all stakeholders to ensure the lifespan and the peat extraction continued and played a role in the power generation and continues to do so by virtue of Edenderry, by virtue of Shannon Bridge and Lanesborough. And now we're at a juncture whereby those very plants find themselves at a crossroads, and your role and that of the board and management is quite precarious and huge responsibility on you. The issues you mentioned in relation to biomass are welcome. I'd like to see more progress in that, and maybe you mentioned it'll be in the coming weeks, but it's essential that the allegiance or alliance with Cuilta in that area is that a micro, that crystallises quickly, and thereafter that there's an effective means by which the biomass industry can be improved upon in order for that to take off and be part of the co-fueling that you mentioned earlier. And that there There was foresight then too, back then in the 80s and 90s, that there was potential for co-fueling in the knowledge that peat extraction will come to an end at some stage. But anyway, let's get back to the briquette factories.
A few questions.
Yeah, I have 3 questions. And I think, we're 3 or 4 weeks waiting, and this is a very important issue. This is the Angus of the Midlands, I might add, and there's enough time and effort and going into that area, and, we want to make sure that we don't have the same questions that will arise during the course of that debate at any juncture into the future. The big issue I've asked you in relation to the briquettes, and I know there are seasonal elements to that sector of the business that we all know about historically. And we've had good summers in recent years, last year particularly. Now we have a stockpile which says that they can meet the demand that the market is placing upon them, and that's why you have closures. The big thing here is the carbon tax. And when the carbon tax was introduced, there was a derogation given to Móna into the briquette factory by the then previous government. I don't have to name names, but it was given, and it ensured the viability of that sector, that it can compete competitively, and especially be in a position to compete competitively with the market forces in the north. Under this government, it was reinstated and it was doubled. Now that may be political, it's a political charge on my part, but you have a responsibility, as I said, to the shareholders. What negotiation or what consultation takes place at government level, at ministerial level, between yourself and whoever holds that office at any given time? And what consultations have you had with the minister on foot of that as it arose? Did you fight the implementation? Did you fight the doubling of it? Have you spoken to them since? Have you highlighted the effect it has had on your potential to compete in that marketplace? Because that, and that alone, is the kernel of the question as regards the future of that sector. That's my first question. I'll try and speed up if I can. Now, as I said to you, you brought in broader issues in your summation when you talk about towards 2030. You've sought, and management has sought, up to 24 million of cuts per annum in relation to Móna activities. And you say that you need those cuts to be in a position to meet, to be in a position to continue in existence beyond 2019. ESB have only said in recent weeks that they are committed to continue their partnership with yourselves for their own plants and for yours and the supply of peat, both in a 100% fuel, peat fuel or coal fuel, whatever might ensue. But is it not strange that you would have sought to meet, engage and ultimately agree terms and conditions and contracts with the ESB and the costs associated with that, and agree some indication of what the price might be beyond 2019, beyond PSO, and maybe then you'd be in a position to go back and look at the costs, look at the sort of reductions that were necessary thereafter. I think you've put the cart before the horse. Okay? You look at me quite confused. What I'm saying to you is you've decided before you meet with the ESB, before you agree a contract, before you agree a price, that you need 24 million in cuts. You don't know what your deal is with the ESB yet. You don't know how long that contract is, you don't know how much it is, and what effect it will have on your costs. I find that strange. And the last point I want to raise is, then having decided that, the mechanisms used in order to seek implementation of it. And as I said earlier, you have a lot more experience in the area of industrial relations than I have. You have a lot more expertise in the area of industrial relations than I have. You have a lot more knowledge of the Labour Court and the Labour Court Commission and all the mechanisms within it to resolve issues than I have. But I know, and those I represent know, and the communities from where I reside know, that every effort that was made by government and board over the years to effect change, to meet the demands of market change, to diversify, to alter, was all done in consultation and with consensus with the workforce. and they very seldom went to the Labour Court. And I would have expected that to be the case in this instance, in this period of its development also, especially with somebody of the calibre of yourself in the position that you're in. There are 9 or 10 issues before the Labour Court, as I understand it. Morale, believe it or not, is at an all-time low amongst the workforce in relation to issues of pay and conditions. And I hear a lot of talk around the country about done stores and about 0 hours contracts and about difficulties the workforce has in assuring their future in that company and others. Many people have been asked and told to reapply for their jobs. And having done so, they find the pay and conditions vastly different than what they were before they reapplied for that job within Bord na Móna. 30% pay cuts in some instances. I find it unbelievable, to be quite honest, that that has been allowed to evolve. And I would ask you, please, explain to me, considering the role that you have and that you are expected to carry out as the shareholders' interest, as the government's representative, how is it that almost every question that is asked of management, of the staff, is now ending up in the Labour Court?
Okay. Thanks, Deputy Cowen. If we could ask for a response, and I don't want to get into a back and over situation, so if you make a response, because I'm conscious of the other members that want to get on in here as well. So if we give a response, and if Deputy Cowen wants to come back at the end, that's fine, but I want to move on after the response, if that's okay. So Mr. Horgan, do you want to?
Thank you, Chairman. As I understand it, Deputy Cowen is asking if we fought the government policy on carbon tax. The answer is no, we didn't. We are required to have regard to government policy and to comply with it. We do, however, on a continuous basis, and particularly on carbon tax, we have let the Minister and the Department know of the effects of carbon tax on our business, and they're continuously updated on that. It's not something that we are in a position to take a stance on. The government has wider issues to consider in relation to carbon tax than its simple effect on Bord na Móna. But I can assure you that the department officials and the Minister are continuously kept informed of the effect that it does have on us, as with all other government policies. We work closely with many departments, so we let them know what the effect of prospective and existing policies are on a continuous basis. The second question was, why are we cutting our costs now when we don't know what they will be in 2019? The answer to that is we ourselves operate a peat-fired power station. We know the economics of it. The two power stations that the ESB operate are broadly similar to our own. So we know what it takes to make our plant competitive and stay in business, because we lose the PSO this year. And so we know that from next year what the price of peat has to be going into our power station to make it economic. So in other words, we have a demonstration project. If we can't show to the SB that we can make ours operate commercially, the SB won't be interested in operating theirs on a non-commercial basis. It's clear. We have never said that we will operate or ask anyone to operate a power station on a non-commercial basis. So our job is to make ours work next year on an economic basis. When we can demonstrate that to the ESB, then we're in a strong position to be able to go to the ESB and say, look, we have done it with ours, so therefore you can do it with yours. So we know now from internally our own analysis what the costs would be. So that's how we know the extent of the cost cutting that has to be done. If I turn, the third point that Deputy Cowen raised was in relation to the industrial relations practices. During my time as chairman, and I think it's probably the first time ever, but the board asked the management of Bord na Móna to reach an agreement, a protocol with the trade unions as to how we would interact. a broad framework as to how the trade unions and the company would interact. A protocol has been agreed, or was agreed, with the trade unions that was approved by the trade unions and approved at board level. I'm not sure if that was ever done in the history of Board Móna before, where a protocol was agreed and signed off by the board. And the management of the company are operating in accordance with that protocol ever since. That's an agreed protocol. The difficulties that the company and the unions face and that face employees are perhaps unprecedented, but they have to be tackled. We can't just pretend that hard decisions don't have to be taken. And we have quite honestly and openly put those proposals to our trade unions in accordance with our protocol. And while there have been a number of issues that have been to the Labour Court in relation to these changes, I have to point out that on every single occasion they have been to the Labour Court has found that the company has acted in accordance with the protocol agreed and in accordance with good industrial relations practice, and has recommended that the employees implement the various changes. So I don't see it as unusual that a company that's going through such a difficult period in readjustment would have difficulties in negotiation, and that both parties would use the services provided by the state to help resolve those difficulties. That is what we have done, and we will continue to do that. There was a mention there of a 30% cut in pay. I just want to say that no basic pay rates in Board Móna are being cut or proposed to be cut. Some elements of other allowances and stuff like that are being cut, and some people are taking other jobs that are of lower total remuneration. That's true. But all of that has been managed carefully through the established procedures and in accordance with the protocol that has been agreed with the trade unions.
If I could ask the Chairman, first of all, you did confirm to Deputy Fitzmaurice there was 54 million profits last year. Can you confirm that you're heading for a higher figure this year, based on initial figures? Secondly, I think this protocol that you mentioned, when was the protocol agreed, and what year, say, for example, and against what background was it agreed, and was it prior to the present round of transformation that is ongoing? As other deputies and as I have said, the issue at hand here now for many members of staff is that they're being asked to reapply for their job, and the pay and conditions associated with the job and the contract associated with it is a lot different than what they had the day before they applied for it. Greatly diminished, pay greatly diminished, location much further than where it was, and costs associated with getting to work is such that it's not viable for them. And in that instance, will those staff that are discommoded in such fashion be offered voluntary redundancy? Can you give that commitment itself? But, as I said, and others have said, with your background in industrial relations and the expertise that you have, and to think that everything in the form of industrial relations or negotiation or consultation is taking place in the Labour Court is a poor vindication of the mechanisms, whatever they are, that are in place. And as I said, and I said earlier, the region and the constituency that I come from would not exist were it not for Board Móna stroke ESB. We wouldn't have won All Irelands, we wouldn't have the Kilcormacks, we wouldn't have the Clohans, the Brackners in my region. There would be no life, there would be no hope for those towns and villages. And there's little hope as it is going on, and you want to be political about it. Excuse me, I finish now, if I might.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you to do.
Yeah, no problem at all. If I'm getting too political, of course I'll be stopped, I know.
No.
But listen now, there is a crisis here. There is huge changes that take place. But what we're saying to you is huge change has taken place over the years. And all the stakeholders have sat around the table, have come to an agreement, and have moved forward and have progressed, and we've survived and we've moved on, and you've diversified, some good, some poor, some not. we've moved on. The present scenario that exists and the manner in which it is taking place will leave us further decimated because there's no future based on that sort of prerogative that's being employed. I want to know what's the protocol, when was it agreed, against what background, because you'll find whatever it wasn't against the background for which the employees are being asked to have their work practices turned upside down presently.
2 minutes to respond, please.
Yes, the financial results for this year, I haven't actually seen the fully audited accounts yet, and so I can't say precisely what the figure will be, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to announce them yet. So I really don't want to go any further than say that we expect them. Obviously, I've seen the management accounts, but we expect the audited accounts to show profit roughly in line, and performance roughly in line with last year. But I prefer not to go any further than that. The full results will be announced in due course. The protocol was agreed, as far as I can remember, sometime in 2012 or 2013, and it was the protocol was negotiated between the management and the company, and it's right that the board take that, be responsible and take ownership of the overall framework within which negotiations take place. But I, as chairman, do not get involved in the detailed nitty-gritty of negotiation. That's a matter for the company negotiations, and it would be entirely inappropriate for me as chairman to be saying, well, can you offer a bit here or a bit there? And I don't do that, and I won't do it. But I don't agree that the company has operated outside the agreed protocol. This is a fully unionized company. The trade unions represent the employees fully, and we have people who engage full-time with the trade unions on all of these issues. And it's, as far as I'm aware, and I'm not as far as I know, that the negotiations are done in a proper way with the trade unions. The issue is put forward to them. Of course, sometimes a company proposes something and is prepared to concede on aspects of it, and that's what bargaining is about. You listen to what the other side says, and you withdraw some of the harsher measures because you trade them for others. That's the way negotiations operates. So I'm not going to comment on whether or not there was a proposal to reduce anybody's pay by 30%. If it was, it may have been part of a negotiating proposal, but I wouldn't be aware, and neither should I be expected to be aware of the details of what takes place in those negotiations. The trade unions, of course, are very careful to ensure that this, that it doesn't spill over into, they don't want negotiations in the public domain. And so I'm being as open as I can in relation to what's taking place in those negotiations.
As a representative of government, and by association representative of the public and the shareholder, and you believe a protocol to be in place, and you, as chair of a board, are being informed by management, informed by worker directors and staff and whatnot, that almost all items pertaining to industrial relations are now ending up in the Labour Court, which is against the grain and the thread of industrial relations in that company for the last 30 to 40 years. Would you not say that it would be incumbent on you as that conduit to say, lads, that whatever protocol you have, it's not working? No, would you not renegotiate a protocol that will work and will keep us out of the Labour Court, you knowing full well how wrapped up those issues become in the Labour Court, having served on it for 12 years and been chair of it for 5?
Chairman, it is simply not true that all issues end up in the Labour Court. Very few issues have ended up. A tiny proportion of the issues that are raised go to the Labour Court. The unions are at this very moment working hard and have committed to do their utmost to ensure that the issues that stand between us, which are difficult issues, no face that, but they have determined and have told us that they're determined that they can be resolved at the Labour Relations Commission and not at the Labour Court. So it's simply untrue.
Deputy Culreevy, do you want to take your 2 minutes?